Um, Good evening, everyone. As always, I'll probably make the start a little bit more professional than it will have appeared with me just staring at the screen, looking perplexed. I think this is Martin's first appearance on Eyes and Ears, so welcome to Martin.
Thank you.
We'll try not to do what we normally do, which is run on and ramble for hours about nothing at all. The plan is that we're going to talk about the Soviet Berlin book, which is now dropped. Ludi's then going to talk to us about his trip to the tournament in Las Vegas. It's some green thing on a shirt that he's waving at us. And then we're going to do a little bit about what next. I think just as players, really, rather than any great insight into where Battlefront are going to go. So I'm going to I'll maybe start on the Berlin stuff, in that I bought quite a lot of the Berlin stuff the last time around. So there wasn't really, I'm not sure I'm really going to add very much. My recollection of the Berlin book, the Soviet Berlin book, when it came out in version 3 was it came out so close to the end of version 3 that I never really ended up playing against any of the lists or using any of the lists, because the competition scene went defunct fairly quickly during the changeover, and there's obviously rebuilt itself. So I don't ever remember seeing lots of the sort of M4 huge 203mm mortars and stuff on the tables. I've got a unit of 160 mortars, and I got the heavy Katyushas, although I don't think they've made it into the
cards.
They're on the cards. Okay, right. And had a good chance to look through the cards. And I've got some Soviet Shermans that I kind of crashed out of boxes of things that I'd use for other things. But I'm honestly thinking I don't think I've ever used the Shermans. So it'll be interesting, hopefully, that it sticks around. There's a bit more length of time for people to get a feel for stuff. So other than the 203mm mortar, the big things, just because they look kind of cool, I'm not sure I'm going to add anything to my forces. But Martin, you're kind of new to the video chat. So what about you? And I think there was one particular thing that excited you in the cards, wasn't there?
There's some good bits in the cards that I quite like. Yeah, there's some useful bits and pieces in there. But overall, it's a evolutionary step of the Soviets. Unlike most of the other forces in the late war period, they don't get a lot of new equipment. Most of the equipment that's introduced in the book is actually equipment that they'd had for 12, 18 months prior to that point. So for me, I didn't buy anything for Berlin last time around with the models. So I've been waiting for the new plastic Sherman kits to stock up my my Soviets. Other than that, I've got some 160s like you, Rich. I've got a pre-order in for some 203s just because they're going to look really smart, but they're probably going to sit in a shelf, in a box, in a cabinet. Will they ever get used? I don't think so. A bit like, why have you got 10 Sturmovix sitting on a shelf? Well, I've got 10 because I've got them in different paint schemes, but do I ever play with them? No. They just all sit there looking nice.
There's a man after my own heart, because I have 4 different Strelkovy armies in different uniforms.
Yeah,
so
that's right. Yeah, no, I'm terrible like that. I'm those who read anything I write will realise that I'm a bit of a completionist when it comes to my hobby. I like to have all the boxes to fill in on a org chart when I build stuff. So I build far more than I ever play with. And being a bit of an avid collector, I never sell anything unless I really get my arm twisted on that front. So yeah, the cards, I like the cards. I like the book, actually. There's a lot in it that if Battlefront put their hand on their heart, I think they'd say they should have released already, because the only real new formations are the Red Banner guys. I like the way they've done that. It's a good blend between sort of the veteran rifles and the Sturmovik battalions. that were formed, the Storm battalions. So you can build both, although they don't call them the same thing. But generally, yeah, it's not the most exciting release. And I know a lot of the guys on the blog have sort of said, yeah, so what? Mr. Parnell being probably the chief candidate of that last week.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you over my comments.
Yeah, that's right. Put your comments on the table, Lee. We'll see what happens. So it's not got so much appeal. I think the German Berlin book will have a lot more, because there's going to be a lot more cool kit coming from the Germans. The Russians don't have anything. That wasn't how they built their army in that period. So it's all about numbers. It's an economic war that they're fighting. So you don't get loads and loads and loads of evolution of stuff. It's just basic equipment and lots of it, which oddly enough is quite actually hard to reflect in the game. The numbers game is difficult to proxy in a tabletop game, where you've got to kind of give both players a chance. The realities of a lot of the Eastern Front battles were that they were completely one-sided, because one side or the other would have had massive numeric advantages. It dwindled by the time you get to Berlin and the sort of final storming. I think the Soviet numbers were something like 9-1 at that point, memory serves. Men and probably about 3-1 on tanks and other armored fighting vehicles. So you got a lot of that whittled out. But yeah, I think if you're a Soviet player, the book's good. It's a nice book. It's got loads of great history in it. It's a good read, if nothing else. I often think we're very Western Front centric in the way we look at the Second World War. Not surprising where we all live. Well, Ludi excluded, but I'm not quite sure.
Maybe next time I'll do it in front of my bookcase, which is definitely not Western Front centric.
Well, I was going to say yours is like mine, Rich, I imagine.
Anyway, so let's go to Lee, because maybe Lee has a slightly different view of the book.
I think I agree with Martin. If you're a Soviet player, there's a lot to like with the new book. Obviously, you got the new I2Ms. You got the the Red Banner infantry in there. If you like T-34s, they only appear twice in the entire book, so it's very much focused on the Emchas. But like I say, as Martin alluded to, the Emchas really should have been in the Bagration book, yeah. Well, and the mid-war book with the dry holes, yeah.
The dry hole 75, yeah.
Yeah. So, but again, at Spartafront, pandering to release schedules and driving interest, which as a company you kind of got to expect. The command cards are interesting. There's a few little bits in there. There's basically the Soviet equivalent of the Schwimm wagon, right down to the points, as Duncan keeps getting under the belt.
We'll be having a count of Ford GPA Jeeps later.
Yes. And like I say, you got the heavier Katyushas in as well and that kind of thing. So, and like I say, they got an interesting mission there, which I know Martin has played versus Duncan. Was it holding the line of biding time or something like that?
Biding time.
Yeah. So it's just basically, the Germans just holding the line desperately whilst getting pummeled.
Yeah. That's pretty much the way it plays.
Yeah. Like I say, I've never been a great Eastern Front player. I've got into it. I've got a small Soviet army, but really my interest stops pretty much after the Comet appears in terms of the Flames of War releases, and that's it. And even that's kind of pushing it, because generally Market Garden kind of tops out where I get interested. But yeah. If you like the Soviets, then the Berlin books can be quite handy for that. If you want to do the Berlin battles, it can be very handy for that. Like I say, you got all the specialist stuff in there, like the really cool little assault units, which is like 2 T-34s and 2 assault gun, 152 assault guns.
2 152s, it is.
Yep.
Way forward.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, somebody texted me about this. Said, how do they work then? And I went, well, I know they're historic, but how do they work? And I said, well, you could always go for reading about how they worked in real life and see whether that works on the table. That's always a good place to start.
I suspect it would. Yeah, I think I am going to be probably revisiting my forward detachment in the new book because, like I say, the T-34 forward detachment is the only T-34 list in there. I've always been a big fan of forward detachment as a card in the Bad Russian books, so revisit it in the Berlin book as an actual formation would be good.
Cool. Ludi, have you had a chance to?
I've had a quick browse of it and the cards, and yeah, I'm thinking about doing a small Sherman Su-76 combination thing when I get around to it. I'm already kind of waiting on the German book because there's something that we might be doing with Alex, who's making a comeback to the Breakthrough Assault team. Someone I met. Alex is someone I met at the LVO, and he will be coming back to the team as a writer, and we'll be doing a collaboration article on Berlin when it comes out.
I'm assuming you mean Alex Montalvo, not Alex Hamilton.
Yes. No, Montalvo.
And that would be a surprise.
Yes, it would. Yeah. Okay, that's cool. So marks out of 10 then for the Berlin book. You went last, Ludi, so you can go first.
Okay. 7, 8 out of 10.
Cool. Lee?
I'll probably go with 7. I think it's going to set the meta alight, but the lists are solid lists.
Martin?
Difficult. On a general level, I really like it, but is it the best book? Definitely not. So yeah, I probably agree with the guys. It's going to be somewhere in that 7 to 8 range overall.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll reserve judgment, which is my prerogative, isn't it? Till I've played some of the stuff that I've got in boxes, so I might try the Shermans out. I think my long-standing issue is just the way the T-34 just doesn't seem to work in Flames, and effectively it was the tank that won the war, but you just don't see it. You just don't see people using them very often. I think particularly really good Soviet players used to, but you don't see Tankovi in the way that you used to see him in V3. So, but Battlefront seems to be saving its love for the Soviets for Team Yankee at the moment. So, I mean, even Mark has been attracted to buying a VDV force, which is, in Battlefront team, but in Breakthrough Assault Service, it's almost like me buying Germans. So I've been looking at the infantry, and I think some of the infantry looks quite interesting. So I'll come back at a later, a later video chat and say, yeah, I think it was an X or a Y or a Z. But
I think the a lot of it depends on how you look at the way you play and how you look at the game. Oddly enough, I was having a conversation with Mark this afternoon about that. And if you think of the game in its totality, playing with the Soviets requires a different way to assess the game. Yep. And that's really difficult to translate to people, to tell them that, you have to play differently. But yeah, we just play the game, don't we? Yeah, but you have to play the game in a different mindset, a different manner, a different feel. You have to embrace the weakness, as Fred would tell us. You can't just apply standard gaming metrics to the Russian armies. You have to have a different way to think about it. And if you can't mentally flex within a game system, a rule set system, you've got no chance of being any good with Russians. And that's very, very true with the Russian tanks. It's not so much an issue with the infantry. You can play Russian infantry like you can play British or German or Italians or anything else, but you can't play Russian tanks like you play American tanks. You just will never work. You have to play how the Russians operated. And it's all about fire and maneuver. And that doesn't translate very well in the game. So which I'll pick up more of when we get towards V5 discussions.
So you've already mentioned that you've been speaking to people in Las Vegas, Ludi. So do you want to run us through the experience playing in the States?
So last week I flew to first to Los Angeles, where some of you guys might know. At least Richard should remember Kevin Morris from the US team, ETC. Met me at the airport, and the next morning we drove with Kevin and Igor Torgerson, also someone the ETC players might remember, to Las Vegas. And we were there Thursday evening. Friday, I just hung out at the event when the guys had a Team Yankee tournament. And then Saturday, Sunday, 3+2 games. Lost 3, won 2. It's a place somewhere. It was a huge tournament, by the way. It was like 48 players or something. And place, yeah, and Flames of War as well. There was there was a few more players at Flames of War than Team Yankee, and yeah, it was an amazing event. Bunked with Vincent Arroyo, who won both tournaments, and Chris Jackson shared a flat, and yeah, it was really nice event. The at least the West Coast scene is extremely welcoming. I had guys I'd never met before just coming to shake my hands and thanking for me to fly, just for flying over to the US and have games with them, even if I never played against them during the whole tournament. And there was, I mean, we don't have events of that size in Europe. There was, so the Las Vegas Open 2023 filled a whole casino's like event center. There was 40K with almost 1,000 players. Age of Sigma with a few hundred. Then there were workshops from different painters and whatnot. Horus Heresy was played, and then Bolt Action, Infinity. It was so big that it didn't even have time to go and look through all the event halls. Even though I had Friday off, so to speak. But yeah, an extremely welcoming scene, really good event. Well, according to Kevin, who organized the whole event, where we were there for the Saturday evening buffet carnivore challenge. Didn't place so well there. I managed to eat 15 different species, and 2 guys managed to eat 29. And it wasn't enough. And it wasn't enough to just taste this meat. You had to finish. I have no idea how some of the guys finished 29.
I don't know. I've got some idea.
Yeah, but yeah, it was a great event, and actually got to bring something home from the event. Some of you might have seen it on Facebook, but thanks, guys.
Well done.
Yeah, well done, mate.
Best sportsman. It was really surprising to get it, especially since Kevin introduced me as someone who didn't speak any English, and you were not supposed to vote on anyone non-American. Although everybody knew how it would go. But it was, yeah. It was a really good event, and I hope I'd be able to make it next year as well, because honestly, there's been very few events that have been able to meet that standard.
Mm-hmm.
And well, when you stay at a casino as well, there's a lot of fun after the games too.
Yeah, I mean, I think
you can play on a 1 cent bet, and they will bring you drinks.
Yeah.
All night.
I think the thing for us over here is just the space and the size of being able to get that amount of games
Yeah.
into a venue without the venue being so expensive that you just wouldn't be able to. The
Yeah.
cost of the place would be big. I mean, Rivalry used to be about 100 players, and we used to play in the Worlds when I was playing Ancients, and you would get, a fair number at Derby and places like that. But competitions with 1,000 players in, I can't even begin to think where you would do that in the UK without having to hire.
All I'm saying is Blackpool Open. That's what you got to be. You got the after game gambling. You got the glamour of the North's foremost venues.
Have you ever been to Blackpool?
He clearly hasn't.
I mean, some of you, I think, actually, probably nobody does know. That's where I grew up. So, frankly,
and you've moved to a very remote area in Scotland as a result.
I mean, I did, being a Yorkshireman growing up in Blackpool was a barrel of laughs.
Due to my company's pain pinching, I've stayed in Blackpool off season many a time to go to BAE Wharton. So, yes.
I mean, I went back to run a course for work a few years ago, and the same wallpaper was peeling off the same pub walls that it had been when I moved away 20 odd years ago. So, I'm not sure it's that much of an attraction, to be brutally honest. I don't know what you mean by. But I think the sort of Games Expo thing that runs in Birmingham, which used to be in a hotel, but I think it's now moved to the exhibition centre.
They hold it at the exhibition centre.
Is pretty big, so I guess that's the one that would possibly be able to grow. But I don't know how much of a.
But you look at Warfare. Warfare is in what I would always call Hall 1 of the Farnborough Air Show. It's in the Farnborough Exhibition Centre. We were only using.
We used a sixth of the. No, it was less than that.
Yeah, but I was going to say a third, but yeah, maybe it's a sixth. There's a lot more hall it could expand into if the demand was fair. So that's running.
I was going to say the closest event to something like the LVA here in the UK would be Warfare.
So Warfare's venues changed then since I last came back.
They've had a couple of moves.
I can't remember. It was somewhere in Reading the last time I went.
Yeah, I used to hold it at a leisure centre. The leisure centre. Yeah, no, was being redeveloped, so they had to move. They ran it at Ascot Racecourse, which was very nice.
Yeah,
but it was a bit impractical as a venue, to be honest.
It was the small games were all hidden, and it was hard to. Well, all you did was run up and down to the vendors and flames a wall.
Up and down the stairs.
And you didn't see anything of the other stuff because it was too big.
Because it was multi-floored. Yeah.
Yeah, this one was just on one floor with a side room for some of the vendors, but you got a chance to go around and see the other games going on, that kind of thing. There's a big 28mm Cold War game going on with like huge Harrier models and stuff. It looks quite cool. And the Vietnam.
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking the range of games and number of players. So I think there must have been. I forget. I think we had. I want to say there were 500 players, but there might have been more than that in total.
Yeah, I could believe that. I mean, we had.
There might have been 500 tables worth of gaming going on, which multiple systems again. You get massive amounts of traction if you're running anything related to Games Workshop.
Lots of historics, lots of sci-fi.
Yeah.
No Team Yankee.
Well,
no, I think that's still slowly rebuilding, isn't it? So we'll see how there's a sort of multiplayer team competition going on.
Well, I kind of like the idea of having a 3-day event with day 1 being one game and day 2 and 3 being the other one. That was quite fun. Although I don't currently have a painted up Team Yankee army, and even if the guys offered me one, which again telling something about the community over there, hey, you don't need to travel with 2 armies. We've got you covered. But yeah, it's something I might try at some point, not this year. It's a bit too late to change the schedule for the Helsinki or the Finnish nationals, so to speak.
Yeah, so on the
but-
chat, I think we're just talking to people who are coming to Helsinki in
Yeah.
a
So
few weeks' time.
obviously
There's
we've got
Soren and
Patrick.
Petter and
Yeah.
Patrick. So there's a bit of a niche
Half of
audience
our viewers,
tonight
at least.
On the chat. I did like Soren's comment, which is that you need to be a masochist if you want to play Soviets. Although,
They're speaking
you
to a
know,
man who took Soviets. Which tournament did he take Soviets to
he took
recently?
Soviets to the ETC in Lake War,
It was
Soviet infantry,
yeah.
and won 4 games. So
Yeah.
you know, it's not so much of a masochist.
Yeah, but didn't he have a gimp ball in his mouth all throughout the tournament or something?
No, he did. He was the best player on our team by him.
There goes
Paolo
monetization.
very well. They scored. Him and Paolo scored the majority of our points. They both did pretty well. So yeah, let's kind of have a. So thanks for that, Ludi. And I think that I think there's some chat going on some other forums about how we try and pull together a better list of competitions, because as the world starts to open up again a little bit, I think people are wanting to travel a bit more.
Yep. Yeah, I know. I know
yeah.
there's a few national communities working on like their own calendars for events, but I mean, to have one consolidated place. So if you're a good web developer and know what you do and like Flames of War, contact Lee, Richard, any one of us.
Yep.
And don't contact me because I won't have a clue what you're talking about. So yeah, maybe Lee or somebody that
you're an organizer by trade, Richard.
Say again?
You're an organizer by trade.
I'm a negotiator by trade. Actually, I have a member of staff that does.
So you'll sit down with us and make a good deal then. Yeah, no, but we could definitely use a calendar with all the events going on.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a chat going on among some people about whether we just ask Battlefront to make theirs a bit more accessible and a bit more usable.
Let's just say that having contacted their way, don't want to piss off anyone now, but I have contacted them regarding the Finnish nationals, even their website team ages ago. The tournament is in about a month. Anybody seen anything on their website?
It's in exactly a month.
Yeah. So, but at least Matt's taken care of the other stuff. So thanks to Matt Sully, Battlefront.
I mean, it was a place.
Sad not to get you over this year, but we'll get you over next year.
Well, there's a couple of us coming from the team. So Søren's coming and I'm coming. So you're stuck with us too.
Yep. I know Lee wanted to come over, but
I'm trying. The wife's convinced, and maybe next year I'll be able to do it. So
your wife's Finnish as well, and she's
Finnish, yeah. So we'll bring them mother-in-law across as well, and those two can go through a day.
So yeah, it's gonna say the objective there being to kill 2 birds, 1 stone, and be allowed to play games all weekend without getting into trouble. I like it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes, Martin, will we be expecting you next year as well?
I wouldn't bet on it. I very rarely travel to play these days.
Yeah. No, it's been actually stunning. It's almost a 50-player tournament soon.
That's good.
Of the only restriction we have right now is that we've used up all terrain from Finland to make great tables. We've even got the Swedes coming over with 2 tables worth of terrain. So yeah,
just pop it. That'd be all right. They could have done better than that. It's only got to pop it on the ferry.
Yeah, I mean it's what they're doing, but don't want to force one guy to empty his whole storage.
I mean, I think the thing for me was that was one of the main reasons I used to go on the forum when they still ran the forum on Battlefront, was that you had that ability to post your own information about tournaments and you weren't relying on anything. And I know the forum got a little bit toxic towards the end, but that sort of removing that ability for you to post and publicize your own stuff
The events page is still on the forum.
Oh, is it?
Yes, yeah, it's but the only active bit of the forum that still exists is the events page.
Oh, okay.
It's the only bit that's active. So.
Yes.
So maybe that's the way forward. Then, rather than reinventing and creating a new wheel, is to try and encourage people to get back engaged with the events page on the forum. And maybe that's something we can have a chat with Matt and others about at Battlefront. So we're kind of halfway through the time that we gave it. Well, the time that I've given ourselves, because I've got to drive home after this.
I'm going to go and cook dinner. So
I suspect there might be a longer period that, as I said at the start, that the Berlin Soviet book sort of stays in currency before there's a subsequent change. We were told a long time ago that early war would kind of be done in a similar way to NARM and Fate of a Nation, in that it would be handed on to the third party, with Battlefront retaining some level of editorial control. I think lots of people who know me know that early war is my favourite part of the whole game. I think it's the one where you really have to think, because you can't rely on everything that you hit being, blowing up. And I've had some really good, they were always quite small, because the love isn't the same amongst other people in terms of the tournaments we did. But I think my favourite ETC in terms of the army I took was when we did the poll and people decided that I ought to take Norwegians to
That was
which kind of backfired on Mr. Madigan, who was the one that was encouraging everybody to send me with the Norwegians, and I ended up beating him and won 4 games and drew 2 with it. So it was actually quite a nice little army in the old from the old PDF. I don't know whether the plan will change on early war, but at some point, I do wonder whether there is a new version or a reboot of version 4, and it's version 4.1 instead of version 5. But I thought we'd have a go at maybe, and guys on the chat, if you want to ask questions or make comments, and we can have that sort of discussion for a wee bit. One thing you keep, one thing that you get rid of, and one thing that you would fundamentally or change or bring back, or and I'm going to go to Lee on that one. So one thing you keep, one thing you get rid of, and one thing that you change.
So I'm largely happy with version 5, but what I in general,
was that a faux pas version 5?
Version 4. You're largely happy with version 4.
Sorry, yes. Sorry, I'm not. Yeah,
deliberate faux pas.
Could keep say version 5 in my head.
Lee, have you seen something we
I was
haven't?
going to say, Lee just busted his NDA wide open.
I deliberately stay away from doing it again.
Don't worry, people beat him up afterwards.
Doing the podcast, I'd be blurting everything out if I wasn't careful. I'm largely happy with version 4. It's what I'd like to see is more emphasis on the 4 Fs: find, fix, flank, and fight. Now, version 2 and 3 had that to us. I mean, find is a God Eye View game. But you used to have like the old eyes and ears on the recce. I'd like to see that come back, because recce, it does its spearhead, and then largely it's maybe harassing Nebelwerfers and stuff like that. But what I think really, although the assault's got simplified a lot, which is good, but the fact you can shoot over your own guys means it's impossible to flank the assault. In the old days, but you wouldn't go for a head-on assault, you try and flank. So enemy can't shoot for his own guys, he trips over it. I'd like to see that return to make the assault a lot not easier to pull off, but easier. You have to put more thought into pulling it off rather than just hey deal straight down the middle and hope that you can make it through the fire. So other than that, I mean, generally, I think the version 4 works. The real problem I ever had with version 4 is the points and how the pointings worked. That's a more fundamental change. I don't think Battlefront would invalidate all the books with version 5. It'd be like structural changes at most. So yeah, more emphasis on the 4 Fs I'd like to see in the next rule set.
So I think that last point might actually turn into our February-March chat. Actually, what do you think of the new points and
dynamics? Yeah,
if we trail that a little bit more than we trail this one, we might get a few more people involved. Ludi, one thing to keep, one thing to get rid of, one thing to change.
To keep dynamic points. Keep the dynamic points, because now you can update anything that we players tell you guys that isn't working. So we don't have to go through the kitchen and then fix it. Then take back the Pacific Theater. That was fun. That was actually one of the things that got me back to the game after a long break. So yeah, somewhere behind that door, and the next door is a full Pacific US Marines Army. And what was the last one? Throw away?
Yeah, one thing to keep, well, or things to keep,
Yeah.
things to get rid of, and things to change or
Okay,
tweak.
to get rid of, I don't know. There's not really anything I wouldn't like at all. No, I've got nothing to throw away. Sorry.
Okay, they don't have to be sorry about it. That's
Yeah.
It's we're all entitled to our own opinion, however wrong it is. So I love that deadpan finish thing. I never know when whether he's got the humor or not. Martin, what about you?
So I think I've liked most about what they've done in V4 is probably I like the game mechanics in general. I'm like Lee. I like the game mechanic and the way the game flows. I think it works as a game really well. Probably the thing they introduced at V4 that's most appealed to me, and I think has been the most successful, is the variable soft stats. The expansion of what they are, rather than just being fearless, veteran, confident. The variations that you can now, the subtlety that brings into it.
Yes.
Like Lee, I think the change of point base value was a bit of a disaster of an act. It's not granular enough to support that type of mechanics. You need a much more refined points distribution to do that. So I suspect that would be something I personally would like to have seen return, but appreciate that it'll be very difficult to go back to that. So we're probably now stuck at base 100 for who knows how long. So I think there's going to have to be a bit of thought maybe on Battlefront's side about whether they fractionalize at some point when we introduce half points. Dangerous that path is, and slippery as that slope might be, we might see a bit of that.
It's 5 until like the tournament points this year is 72.5 points. Work out your reserves accordingly.
Yeah. Well, my maths is pretty
And
good.
then
My
got
maths is pretty good, so I don't have trouble with that. I meet people.
Petter's suggesting 300 points per game would be great. Do you have any idea how long that game would take?
Well, it depends what you play with.
Well, okay, yeah. But for example, in Richard's case with his Red Army, he would actually have to bring the whole damn Red Army.
I doubt it.
Probably have to bring a couple of the.
I might have to empty. Yeah, you can say you might have to empty a shelf. The 300 points. Depending on how many tank battalions you've got and what have you.
There's a couple of people in the comments. So Mike Everest agreeing with Lee about flanking, and Scott. Now, I'm not just saying this because Scott's my new captain, but I think that the point about the evolutionary change rather than revolutionary change, that was V2 to V3 rather than V4 to V5 would probably be no bad thing.
There's a couple of little things they could tweak. Certainly, you could do something better with the recce. I think it's really worth that if we're going to go down the route of getting rid of the corpse level artillery completely, let's get rid of it completely and go to an off-table artillery option in the main as a general rule. That type of corpse support.
The artillery models look so cool.
Yeah, but
they do, but they're so
really
they're
in a
so
company level game, are they?
No.
And let's face it, the only one you've now got that's a real of all the model of all, when you look at all the range, all the models across all the periods, you know, they've got rid of all of the heavy AA with the exception of the 88. They've got rid of most of the 3-inch AA as well. You know, if you're a Soviet player, you've got a choice of machine guns, or slightly bigger machine guns. You know, pretty much the same with the Americans. They've got no heavy AA. I know there's some historical precedent around that with them, but not necessarily. You know, they're down to pretty much the bare bones. The only real armies with the AA guns now are the Germans and the British, certainly in the late war period, with 40 mils. I know a few of the Axis allies can have those as well, but the numbers are pretty small in comparison. We've already got rid of that. The only corpse level artillery gun really in the game now is the Soviet 152, and that's only in the game because it's on the plastic sprue with the 122. Let's be honest. You know, I suspect if we really push Battlefront's buttons about it, that would be the truth of the matter of why that's in the book. Because let's face it, who wants a rough one none gun? It doesn't, unless you're going to give it to me for 2 points, like for an entire battery, and you're not going to do that. So, you know, let's get rid of that. And I've played quite a lot of foe using off-table artillery in various places, and you know, as long as you've got your observer, and that brings me on to another one of my pet peeves in V4 is why doesn't everybody have access to infantry observers?
True.
Why are some I hadn't appreciated, as those who follow the blog might noticed, I've been building a lot of Hungarians lately for want of a better hobby at the moment. And I hadn't realized that the Hungarians are the only other army after the Finns that have a foot artillery supporter. And the
German Fallschirmjäger.
Yeah, but you can only have him if you're playing with Fallschirmjäger artillery. Now, my first army influence was Fallschirmjäger. Unlike Eddie, I don't have Landlustrum. I have a proper Fallschirmjäger set up. And they were my first army, oddly enough. And yeah, they're the only other one. So there's three. You know, if they can have them, why can't the rest? Why can't we bring back the rule to dismount the observer from his vehicle? And, you know, I'm going to park my universal carrier next to this very tall building, but I'm not going to climb up the steeple to look at you and observe. It's just stupid, and it makes it causes more trouble than it's worth. But I like the idea of preventing players shooting through their own troops. I don't think that's realistic. I don't think you'd do that in reality. You know, I've not served in the military personally, but my daughter has, so I've got some idea of how it works. I
wouldn't try it.
I wouldn't want someone sitting next to me firing.
I wouldn't try it with an SMG, that's for sure.
I certainly wouldn't. Yeah. Can you imagine doing that with a Sten gun? Christ, you're lucky to hit something at 16 feet, let alone, you know.
But how bad are your shooters then? Because I could last time I had a Sten, I could easily hit targets at 100 meters.
Yeah, but you know, this is us, not you. Okay, you know, you're special, aren't you? In many ways.
You know, bearing how little training.
The Sten is a really nice weapon to shoot.
I'll get onto the story Mike once told me.
Just don't drop it.
Someone who's a Sten marksman.
I mean, I was thinking about, you know, because obviously I set the question up. There's a lot of what Lee and Martin have said that I really agree with. I didn't like the way that it changed. I think most people that know me know that. I do like the additional granularity that comes with the fact that you can have that, you know, it isn't just fearless vet. You can actually have, you know, a veteran that's but better at something than others. So, you know, they might be easier to hit, but they've got that combat factor. So I actually like that extra granularity. I do think that we need to do something with recce, and this will come. So that brings me to one of my pet peeves, right? That if we had kept eyes and ears and people had learned how to use it properly, we wouldn't have this stupidity of hitting on 7s and 8s. Because frankly, you know, if you want to be able to hit on an 8, play a game with 8-sided dice. You know, they do exist, and I just don't get it. It's like, you know, and it's not just because loads of people killed my stuff at the ETC by hitting them on 7s and 8s. I'm not sure the maths has been thought through correctly, and I think it does.
The maths isn't right.
Nathan, as Nathan, my friend Nathan points out, Flames War's only game we're hitting on a 7 requires rolling a 6 and rolling a 5. Every other game, it's roll a 6 and roll a 4, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
It's very odd.
But you know, if you have, you know, I know the issue was, people go to the ground and I can't hit them at whatever range, blah blah blah. So you know, that's what
that's reality for you.
Yeah, if you can't see it, right,
you can't shoot it.
You can't shoot it, and actually, that's what your recce's there for. So you know, that was one of the things I would. And then the slow creep back, which I've noticed with the heavy artillery. So it's a company level game, 25 pounders maybe. Infantry guns, Russian 76s, you can make an argument for them, and then all of a sudden we're going back to 122s and 152s, and now we've got 203mm things that look like they should be running on a railway rather than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm with Martin. I think you either get rid of it or you make it quite limited and you just have it off table.
When they put the
it gets in the way, you have to do things to it in the game that you wouldn't do with a company level simulation or a better simulation. You wouldn't be having to guard unless that was unless that was a particular mission. You wouldn't be having to spend time guarding immobile heavy artillery.
It wouldn't be anyway.
And there were rules in V2. One of if I go back, I didn't play a lot of V2, but there was the rule beyond the Volga, wasn't there? That was basically
that's actually in the. That rule is actually in the city fighting rules,
right?
But only in the city fighting rules, where your artillery, you don't put your artillery on the board.
That's presumably because if you're in a city, there's nowhere to bloody put it.
Yeah, it's 4x4 board. Yeah,
the terrain. Yeah. So I mean, I kind of quite like that.
To my mind,
have it off table.
Yeah, if it's not in the formation, that artillery should not be in the game as an abstract off-table element. Yeah. So, infantry guns, cannon platoons, mortars, they're all present. But anything bigger than that, anything that's in your actual support part of the organisation should be an off-game effect.
Yeah, it's an interesting.
No, I think that's right. I completely agree on assault. The very first game of Team Yankee I played, I'd set up this assault into a building to clear out these Americans. I'd gone in from, I'd moved it, and the guy went, "Oh, I can fire all the way around, and I can fire, over the heads of everybody." Mm-hmm. And I'm like, "Well, you shouldn't be getting 2 shots out of that building." "Oh no, I can shoot everybody."
Yeah,
and you know what? I can shoot from the bottom of a building with my anti-aircraft weapons at your helicopters that are above the building. And I'm like, yeah, this is all a bit too abstract in many ways. And I think Mike's put in the chat, it's effectively giving everybody the old early war French trench warfare rule.
Yeah,
I think it means that it does mean that it's a little bit of the skill, I think, gone out of the game. And I'm going to say one thing. I would get rid of all of the cards that aren't personalities and formations. The whole lucky,
oh god, yes.
Kill, get out of jail free cards. And
yeah.
I've not
a favorite.
They can all go in the bin.
To be fair, Battlefront, that was mainly a mid-war thing, and Battlefront learned from that. And late war, all you got is lucky and make your own luck. So,
yeah.
Well, okay, some of the characters effectively have a soft effect, like.
Yeah, but they had that in V3, so that's fine.
Precisely. But like you say, in mid-war, the whole dead shot thing and all that kind of thing, it's just like, it's all very, I know exactly where it came from. It's them looking at X-Wing.
Yep. And
looking at the pilot stats and 100 points and going, we're going to do that. And it just,
I think the thing for me that is, it's that point of having, I don't play Axis. That's no shock to anybody. But, you don't often get, if you've worked your way into a really good position to be able to kill somebody's elephant through good play, the thing that would really infuriate me, it hasn't happened to me, fortunately, because I probably would have a bit of a grumpy moment, is when somebody goes, "Aha! you have to re-roll that, or I get a get out of jail free, and I'd be like,
that's not the
that's
what you
not
want. What the card you want, Rich, is called Charmed Life.
yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
It doesn't matter that I've dropped a 203mm shell on your head.
Yeah,
because my card says I've survived.
Yes, because we're actually in a Commando comic,
yeah,
and it doesn't really work. So, but I've actually found more and more stuff in it that I like.
That's good.
And I think there's a lot of it that is an improvement on V3. I
It's
think
a lot.
This thing doesn't work. It doesn't give enough granularity, and I could understand it. I know some of the thinking was supposed to be, well, it makes 60-40 easy, and it's much easier for people to get into if they're coming from
the way the reserves work in V4 is much better than it was in V3, because you'd build your list in V3 and in V2. When you put in half, I've got to put half my units in reserve. So what am I going to do? I'm going to put all my dross in reserve, my little 2-point units. And you saw it every time. I think my Brits. The last time I played V3 back in the day, I think I was playing British motor rifles at the time. So I've got a plethora of units. But then you looked at what I'd put in reserve, and you thought, well, all I've put in reserve is a whole bunch of universal carriers. Do they affect my fighting power? Absolutely not.
That was all part of the list build, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that was part of the.
You could game the list very effectively in version 3.
I think the thing was, okay, I get it. 60-40 is easy, and then the first thing I saw was people saying, "Oh, we're now paying with, we're going to 105 points or 72 points," and you go, okay, that kind of defeats the object of having easy maths for those of us that are not mathematicians and are historians.
Yeah, pick a round number. It's much easier.
Yeah. So I don't know. I can't see whatever next iteration leaping back to 1600, whatever points. But I do think they need to work through the point system and what they're looking to achieve with it. Because you're right, I don't think with the additional granularity you get from the different stats,
we've got a much better system of the way something behaves and can perform. But then you handicap it all with the point system. It's almost like trying to play the game or trying to write the game and putting one hand behind your back and saying, well, I could use both hands, but I'm not going to. I think if they'd have stuck with the 1,000-point model and introduced the stock stats they've got now, I think they'd actually have hit the winning. They'd have had a winner, absolute winner of a game system. I get why they changed. I think they were a bit bamboozled by what else was going on in the market at the time, and it seems a lot simpler to do. But actually, the net result is they've ended up with a kind of ugly child with a really good mechanic, some nice variation that they can introduce to the stats, and then no way to implement it, no implementation vehicle, which is your point system, as a result. But it's a bit
somebody on the chat has identified another one of my peeves. I can't say it was one of the reasons I didn't like. I got a downer on V4, but it is the inability of gun teams to defend themselves against infantry,
mortars particularly.
So it's like, okay, most of my friends who served in the artillery, and I had a few, were all pretty good marksmen, and were the idea that they wouldn't be. And I get people saying, "Oh, it was just kit," and they would leave it and lose it and not carry your gun and your rifle. And I'm like, I thought that's kind of covered in Queen's regs or King's regs, that if you didn't have your weapon with you, that was pretty much a chargeable offence.
You're going to Colchester if you don't do that.
Yeah, why dig trenches then around us? Why try to make a battery position reasonably defensible? Yeah. And then you go on and read. I mean, it's not World War II, but you read about the Battle of Coral and stuff that happened to the Australians in Vietnam, where and you just think, that at least gives you a fighting chance of doing something. Whereas, you just stand there, and if infantry gets near you, your only chance is to sort of pack up and run away. I don't think it's a game killer, but it was interesting that someone else has picked that up in the chat as being something that I always thought was a little bit weird. And I'm not sure. I'm really not sure what was wrong with it in V3. What was
I think
Why was it a
the big
problem?
the problem with it in V3 is they effectively enabled you to act as to turn the light, your mortar teams into infantry teams.
Right.
Now they've mitigated that in V4 by making them heavy weapons, so you can't assault. But if you're going to give
Mortars
them,
are infantry.
yeah,
They are infantry. They're just guys that got the short stick and were given a massive heavy tube.
A big heavy
and
tube
the
like
base
about,
plate.
yeah.
And they tend to be special.
Yeah, well, you've got to be pretty strong. I imagine to lug that about. But turning them just into exactly the same as an infantry team in foe really isn't the right idea. But I could certainly, I think, giving them some sort of anti-assault, short-ranged defensive capability would make sense.
Yeah, I mean, they were only ROF 1. They were ROF 1 rifle team. Effectively.
But they were ROF 1.
ROF
1 was. I couldn't remember whether they were 2-1 or 1-1.
No, it was. I'm sure it was ROF. Though I'm sure they were rate of fire
rifle teams.
They were rifle teams, yeah.
So there was no. They didn't get the additional add-on for having the Bren gun team. The Bren sections.
But giving them a restriction so that they could fire as a ROF 1 team in defensive fire would make a bit of sense.
Yeah.
To let them just, because what you could do in V3, if I remember right, is you could just effectively flick between being a rifle team or being a mortar.
So I don't know who Lord Win is on the chat, but Ludi's, I think, quite upsetting by his view on.
No, I'm going to hear about it. I'm going to hear about it in a few days, and I'll stick to my opinion.
Oh, is it one of your colleagues from over in?
Yeah, he's from the local club.
Okay.
You'll meet Richard. You'll meet him in a month.
Cool. So I think that's actually brought us almost to a natural endpoint. Yeah, I think people agreeing with us on the chat. If you made it it just gave gun teams a defensive fire option. So that you can't shoot rifle teams, you can't add it into other people shooting if you can't land your mortars on them. Yeah. But if you're attacked, then absolutely it's
you're going to do something. You're going to do something. That's nothing else. You're going to throw the mortar tube at them.
Yeah. I mean, or
smack in the face from a base plate. I imagine that'd do a bit of damage.
Yeah.
That would hurt.
You probably would need facial reconstruction surgery. So look, I think that brings us to a suitable endpoint. Thanks, Martin, for joining us tonight. Ludi, you've done a few of these. We're up to number 4 now. I think we've kind of talked ourselves into maybe the next one being a little bit about points and the dynamic points, and we can have a debate about whether the points that other people have done are better, worse, different, where we would go. I do think there's a bit of an acceptance that the dynamic points is a help, and it's a step in the right direction, but maybe the fact he doesn't look at infantry has kind of missed a beat there in terms of where we go. But we'll set something up. I can't promise it will be before I go to Finland, because I'm away a bit with work in between now and then. For some reason, I seem to be getting quite busy at the moment in my line of work. We seem to be in the news quite a lot. So, that's kind of taking up a bit of my time. And then I've got a competition in Cardiff in a couple of weeks, and then over in Finland. So maybe the week after we come back from Finland, we can set something up. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for the guys on the chat and the comments, as always. And don't forget, on the YouTube, you can catch up with the podcast that the other guys run as well. And thanks ever so much for joining us.